What if the only thing standing between life and death was the voice of a stranger? A single gunshot echoed across the quiet Wyoming wilderness as Fletcher Ali slumped forward in his saddle, his hand pressed against his bleeding side, warm blood slipping between his fingers. The autumn air was sharp, the sky turning orange as the sun lowered, but Fletcher barely saw any of it. His vision blurred and darkened at the edges. He had been running for 3 long days, and he knew he could not keep going much longer. The year was 1878. Fletcher had left behind a dying ranch in Texas, chasing one last chance at a new life. He had joined a cattle drive heading north through the Medicine Bow Mountains, hoping to rebuild. Instead, the drive had turned into a nightmare. Rustlers had attacked at dawn, killing his companions and shooting him as he fought to escape. Now Fletcher knew the truth. The bullet in his side wasn't the biggest threat. Staying awake was. He leaned over his black and white paint horse, Domino, whispering encouragement. "Just a little further, boy," he murmured weakly. "We'll find somewhere safe." Domino's breath came in hard bursts, but the loyal horse kept moving forward across the rolling land. Fletcher lifted his head and saw a small homestead tucked in a quiet valley ahead. A thin line of smoke drifted from the chimney. It was the first sign of shelter he had seen in miles. Hope flickered in him, faint but alive. But strangers meant danger too. The rustlers had followed him all this way. They would not stop, not after he shot 2 of them. Fletcher's eyelids grew heavy. Every hoofstep sent pain through his ribs. He fought to keep his grip on the saddle, knowing that if he fell now, Domino couldn't save him. As they neared the cabin, a slender figure stepped out holding a rifle. The figure froze for a moment, studying him. Then the rifle lowered, and the person rushed forward. "My God, you're bleeding!" a woman called out, her voice strong and clear. Fletcher tried to focus on her face. Honey brown hair pulled back in a braid, striking blue eyes wide with worry, and a determined jaw that showed she knew hardship. "Ma'am," Fletcher whispered, barely able to speak. "I don't mean to trouble you." His world tilted. The last thing he felt was strong hands catching him as he slid from the saddle and the soft sound of her voice saying, "I've got you, cowboy." Bridget Keller wasn't new to danger. She had survived 2 years alone on her Wyoming homestead. But a half-dead cowboy collapsing into her arms was new even for her. She dragged him inside, her strength surprising even herself. She laid him on her bed and quickly cut away his blood-soaked shirt. The wound was bad, ragged, still bleeding. She grabbed the whiskey and poured it over the injury. The unconscious man flinched, even in his weakened state. She cleaned it, packed herbs into the wound, and wrapped it tightly. His face was handsome under the trail dust, sharp-jawed with tired lines carved from years of work and loss. He was tall, lean, a man used to riding long days and fighting for survival. Bridget worked fast. When she finished tending the wound, she went outside to care for his horse. Domino was exhausted but safe. She led him into her small stable, giving him water and hay, then returned to the cabin. Inside, the cowboy was mumbling in his sleep. Words broken by pain. Something about rustlers. Something about death. A fever was already building under his skin. Bridget placed a cool cloth on his forehead and sat in the chair beside him. She didn't know this man, but he needed her, and she would not let someone die under her roof. "You're safe now," she said softly. "Rest." His eyes flickered open for a moment, green eyes cloudy with pain but still aware. "They're coming?" he rasped. "Who?" she asked, reaching for her rifle. "Rustlers. 3 of them. Shot me. Been tracking me. Half a day behind." A cold chill moved through Bridget. She had faced trouble alone before, but 3 armed men hunting for blood was different. "How far behind you?" she asked. "Not far. You should leave. Take my horse." "Go." "This is my home," Bridget answered firmly. "I don't abandon people who need help." Fletcher tried to sit up, but the pain forced him back down. "Ma'am, I don't want to bring trouble to your door." "My name is Bridget," she said, pushing him gently back against the pillows. "And you'd fall off that horse before you made it 100 yards. He breathed hard, fighting to stay awake, fighting to protect her even now. Bridget checked her ammunition. Her Winchester had 20 rounds, her revolver 12. She hoped it would be enough. She filled water buckets, moved anything flammable away from the windows, and double-checked the doors. When she returned to him, Fletcher's eyelids were dropping. "Don't sleep yet," he whispered. "I need to stay awake." "Why?" Bridget asked gently. "If I fall asleep, I might not wake." She sat beside him on the bed. "You're safe here," she said, placing her hand on his shoulder. "I know how to use a rifle. I'll watch for them. You've fought enough for now." His eyes searched hers, desperate, unsure. "Sleep now," she said softly. "I'm here." Something in her voice, steady, warm, certain, broke through his fear. His breathing slowed, his body relaxed, and for the first time in days, Fletcher Ali surrendered to sleep. Bridget stood, checked her rifle again, and positioned herself by the window. The night wind howled outside, the cabin creaked, and somewhere in the dark hills, danger approached. But she never left her post, not for a moment. The night felt longer than any Bridget had ever lived through. Every whisper of wind against the cabin walls made her tighten her grip on the rifle. Every creak in the wood made her heartbeat quicken. She checked on Fletcher often, thankful each time she saw his chest rising and falling. His fever hadn't broken, but it hadn't worsened either. By dawn, the land outside glowed pale and quiet. Too quiet. Fletcher stirred, his eyes opening with effort. Bridget moved to him quickly, offering water. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. "Like a buffalo stomped on me," he said with a weak grin. "But alive, thanks to you." Bridget nodded, relieved. "The bullet went straight through. You're lucky." "No sign of them yet?" he asked, glancing toward the window. "None," she replied. "But that doesn't mean they're gone." Fletcher pushed himself up, wincing at the sharp pain in his side. "They'll come. Men like them don't stop." Bridget hesitated, then asked, "Who are they? Why chase you this far?" His eyes hardened with memory. "They call themselves the Blackwell Gang. Rustlers. Thieves. The kind who kill first and ask nothing later. They hit our cattle drive near the mountains. Killed my partners in their sleep." He paused, his jaw tight. "I shot 2 of them. The last 3 swore they'd hunt me to the ends of the territory." Bridget felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She had lived alone long enough to know evil when she heard it. "You need to eat," she said, moving to the stove and stirring a pot of broth. "Get your strength back." As she worked, Fletcher looked around the cabin. Small, clean, organized, peaceful. It was a real home, not just a shelter, books on a shelf. A quilt stitched by careful hands. Dried flowers in a jar. Everything spoke of quiet strength. "You built this all on your own?" he asked. "Yes," she answered simply. "After my father died on the journey west, I settled here, took the land we planned to claim. I've been managing since." "Most men wouldn't survive alone out here," he said honestly. Bridget's chin lifted slightly. "I manage." He smiled weakly. "I didn't mean it as doubt, just admiration." A soft color rose in her cheeks, but she said nothing more. She handed him the broth, and he ate slowly, his strength returning bit by bit. But peace didn't last. A distant whinny cut through the quiet morning. Bridget froze. Fletcher tensed. "Riders?" Bridget moved to the window, her hand gripping the rifle. She scanned the horizon, her breath caught. 3 riders, coming from the south. Fletcher pushed himself up too fast, pain hitting him like lightning. "We need to move. The root cellar. Take me there." Bridget grabbed her bundle of supplies, food, water, ammunition, already prepared for an emergency. Fletcher forced himself to stand, leaning heavily on her. His face had gone pale again, the wound reopening with the effort. "You should leave me," he said through clenched teeth. "Take my horse. Go." Bridget didn't even slow her steps. "I'm not leaving you. Hold on." They slipped out the back door just as the riders reached the front of the cabin. Moving as quietly as possible, they made their way to the juniper trees, hiding the root cellar. Bridget helped Fletcher down the narrow steps, his breath ragged from pain. Inside, the space was cool and small. Lanterns, shelves, dried goods, even a little cot. "You come prepared," Fletcher whispered. "For storms," she said. And trouble. They heard muffled voices outside. Boots on wood, horses snorting. "They're searching the cabin," Fletcher warned. "They won't find us," Bridget said, though she held the rifle close. An hour crawled by. Then another. Finally, the voices grew distant. "I need to check," Bridget whispered. "Stay here." "It's too dangerous," Fletcher whispered back. "I won't go far." He caught her wrist weakly. "Be careful." "I will." Bridget slipped out into the fading daylight, moving like a shadow among the trees. Fletcher waited in agony, sweat beading on his forehead, his breath shallow with pain and worry. Minutes stretched unbearably long. Finally, the cellar door opened and Bridget hurried down the steps, her face tense but unharmed. "They're gone," she said, "but they left a message." "A message?" Bridget swallowed hard. "They ransacked the cabin, took food, broke things, and left a note stuck to the table with my own kitchen knife." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "What did it say?" "That they know you're somewhere here, and they'll be back with more men." Guilt crushed him. "Bridget, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "This isn't your fault," she said firmly. "Those men are criminals. They chose this, not you." He looked down. "I should leave. Draw them away from you." "And lead them right back here once they catch your trail?" Bridget shook her head. "No, that's foolish." "Then what's your plan?" he asked quietly. Bridget took a slow breath. "We fake your death." Fletcher blinked. "What?" "Think about it," she said. "They want you dead, not me. If they believe you died from your wound and I buried you, they have no reason to return." He stared at her. "You want to fake my death?" "Yes, we create a grave. A marker. Enough blood to be convincing." "And then what?" "Then," Bridget said, her eyes steady, "you leave here under a new name and start over at your land near Fork Creek. Safe. Free." "And you?" he asked softly. "I stay here until it's clear they won't return. Then," she hesitated, "maybe I move too. Maybe near your land. We could help each other." Fletcher felt warmth spread through his chest, unexpected and deep. "You'd really do all that for me?" Bridget held his gaze. "I already have." The rest of the day was spent planning, preparing, working side by side in tense silence broken only by the wind. And as night fell again, and the cabin stood dark and silent above their hiding place, Fletcher looked at her, this brave, stubborn, remarkable woman, and felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. The next morning came with a cold wind and a pale sky, the kind that warned of trouble long before it arrived. Fletcher sat on the edge of Bridget's bed while she bandaged his wound again. Her hands were steady, but he could tell her mind was racing. "We need to do this fast," she said, "before they return." Fletcher nodded, though his strength was fading again. "Tell me what to do." "You stay hidden in the cellar," she said. "I'll take Domino to the Campbell homestead. They'll keep him safe for a few days. When I return, we'll make your grave." He didn't like the idea of her riding alone, but he knew she was right. "Be careful." "I always am," she said, giving him a faint smile before saddling her horse and riding away. Fletcher returned to the cellar and waited. The hours felt endless. The pain in his side pulsed like a drumbeat, but worry for Bridget pounded even louder. At last, her footsteps returned above him. "They're gone," she whispered down the cellar steps. "Let's get to work." Together, they built a false grave at the edge of her property. Fletcher carved the initials F.O. into a wooden cross. The act felt strange, like chiseling his own past into the ground. Bridget smeared some of his old blood-soaked cloth on her apron to complete the story. "It looks real," Bridget said, wiping sweat from her brow. "It has to be," Fletcher answered. They had just reached the cabin when the sound of fast-approaching horses cut through the air. Bridget froze. "They're back." "Go," Fletcher whispered urgently. "Follow the plan." He staggered toward the root cellar, every movement reopening his wound. She squeezed his arm before running inside the cabin. Her face tightening with fear she tried to hide. Fletcher dropped into the cellar, pulling the door closed just as the rustlers rode into view. The next hour was torture. He could hear muffled voices, boots striking the floor, angry shouting. Then silence. Then more shouting. He waited, breath held, unable to protect her. Finally, at last, the cellar door opened. Bridget stood there, pale and shaken. "They believed it," she whispered. "I showed them the grave." Hawkins said they'd be back later to make sure no one else comes for them. She swallowed hard. "We need to leave before they return." "Both of us?" Fletcher asked. She nodded. "Even if they think you're dead, I'm still a witness. They won't risk letting me live." He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the determination. "Then we go together." They planned their escape late into the night. Bridget would borrow a wagon from her neighbor, load her tools and supplies, and drive her small herd of cattle toward Fork Creek. Fletcher would approach the settlement from a different direction under a new name, Francis Olson. But the rustlers returned far sooner than expected. It was midday when Fletcher heard horses again, too many for Bridget to return with. He grabbed his revolver and dragged himself to the window. 5 riders, Hawkins with 2 of his men, and 2 more he hadn't seen before. They were scanning the land like wolves. "No, no," Fletcher whispered. If Bridget rode into this, they'd kill her. He slipped out the back door, moving through the trees toward the old stable. Pain blurred his vision, but he pushed on. Inside the stable, he piled dry hay in a corner and struck a spark. Flames caught immediately. "Come on," he whispered. "Take the bait." Smoke curled upward. Shouts rose from the cabin. "Fire! Put it out!" As they rushed toward the stable, Fletcher slipped away into the trees, heading toward the trail where Bridget would return. He climbed a rocky rise overlooking the path. His wound burned like fire, but he lifted his revolver and waited. Moments later, he saw her. Bridget was riding back, leading Domino beside her. Fletcher fired once into the dirt ahead of her. She pulled her horses up short. He fired again, hitting a dead tree on the ridge. She looked up and saw him. He saw understanding dawn across her face. She turned her horses and rode away, fast. A rustler spotted her. "There, on the trail!" Hawkins cursed. "After her!" Fletcher ran. He ran harder than he ever had in his life, fighting through pain, blood loss, fear. He reached the meeting place, a bend in the trail where he could intercept her. "Bridget!" "Here!" he shouted. She swerved toward him, leaping off her horse as Fletcher slid behind a boulder, his breath ragged. "They're right behind me!" she gasped. "There's 5 of them." "Stay low," Fletcher said, raising the Winchester she handed him. "We hold them here." The sound of hooves thundered closer. Trees shook with the force. "Spread out!" Hawkins yelled. "I want her alive!" Fletcher's grip tightened. "On my signal!" The first rustler appeared. Fletcher fired. Sparks flew as a bullet struck the rock inches from Bridget. She returned fire, hitting one of the men in the shoulder. 2 against 5. But Bridget fought like someone defending her home. Fletcher fired again, hitting another man in the leg. Bullets cracked around them, splintering bark and kicking up dirt. "We're pinned," Bridget breathed. "Fletcher, you're bleeding badly." He had no breath to answer. He fired again, then dropped behind the rock, his vision spinning. "I have a plan," Bridget said. "Cover me." She slipped to the side, moving with surprising speed and confidence. Fletcher fired twice, forcing the rustlers behind a fallen log. Bridget raised the Winchester and fired clean at the pine tree Hawkins hid behind. Hawkins cried out, stumbling from cover with his arm limp. "Drop your guns!" Bridget shouted. "Now!" The rustlers hesitated, then obeyed. Moments later, they were tied up, bleeding but alive. Fletcher's knees buckled as he tried to stand. Bridget caught him. "We're getting you to Fork Creek," she whispered urgently. "Stay with me." The rustlers were marched ahead of them, hands bound, while Bridget helped Fletcher onto Domino. He barely stayed conscious. With every mile, his vision dimmed. By the time Fork Creek appeared, Fletcher couldn't hold on anymore. Bridget yelled for help, settlers rushed forward, and Fletcher slid from the saddle into waiting arms, darkness swallowing him whole. He woke 2 days later, lying in a soft bed with sunlight on the wall and Bridget sitting beside him. "You're safe," she whispered, smiling through tired eyes. Did they get them? He croaked. All of them. The marshal took them this morning. Quote. He stared at her smile, at the peace on her face, and something in his chest finally eased. What happens now? He asked. Bridget took his hand gently. Your land is north of here. I saw it. It's good land, Fletcher. He squeezed her hand. Our land, he corrected softly. She blinked, cheeks warming. If you want a partner, I'm willing. He laughed weakly. Bridget Keller, are you asking me to marry you? She smiled, shy and brave all at once. Maybe I am. Fletcher felt his heart steady for the first time in years. I'd say yes, 1,000 times. Months passed. Together they built a home, a barn, a future. With each sunrise, Fletcher healed. With each sunset, Bridget stayed by his side. And one evening, with the sky turning gold over their new ranch, Fletcher wrapped his arms around his wife and whispered, The night I first fell asleep in your cabin, I think that's when I started loving you. Bridget leaned into him. I told you then you were safe, and you'll always be safe with me. They stood on their land, partners, lovers, and survivors, finally home.